and that basically is a questionnaire to help you assess your own ideas about money. But I realised that when you talk about money with people, it's never just about like a number on a screen. It brings up a lot of traumas in people. It's very triggering. People don't like talking about it. Realising that no one cares. You know, I think like everyone like thinks about their reputation, like, oh, what will people think of me? And actually, everyone's just so self-centered. I'm part of the generation that got told we couldn't afford houses because
it's a founder episode for Women Are Good Business, the podcast, and we have the absolutely brilliant Linda Du with us this week. She is the founder of Mula Money. Now, they are doing amazing things, and she is going to tell us how she came on this journey, what inspired her to start her business, and all the ups and downs of everything else of being a founder. Please enjoy the episode, but also help us make it go viral. Like, follow, subscribe, share it with everyone you know, and let's continue to be able to share the voices of these brilliant female founders. And welcome to the podcast today, and I will kick off with a question I like to ask all of our founders, which is just it's a big question, but tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about the business that you run.
Sure, so I'm Linda. I was born in the UK, but I left straight after university. I studied engineering, and then I actually decided straight away that I didn't want to work in engineering. So I lived around the world. I did an MBA at Yale in the States, and then I went to McKinsey for nearly half a decade, advising retail banks in Europe, the Middle East and Africa. And I'm actually on my second company technically, but my first company was pretty traditional. I did an asset management company in Berlin. And then now I am the founder of Mula Money, which is a financial wellness platform designed to give people confidence over their financial decisions.
Cool. Okay, so you said you did an engineering degree, but then very rapidly clearly decided you didn't want to do engineering. So what was it that made you realise you wanted to go into something else and you wanted to go off around the world and explore living and working in different places?
Yeah, so I studied manufacturing engineering, which is one of the least glamorous types of engineering. So we were doing our field trips to Derby and Slough, and I'm definitely a city person.
Living the dream.
Yeah, so I didn't want to go to all the other places in the world that aren't Derby and Slough, no offence intended. But so I did something a bit unusual in that I started my MBA straight after my degree at Cambridge. So that was a Silver Scholar programme, and it was like a sandwich programme. So they asked me to take at least a year out between my first and second year. And actually in that first year, between years, I did something great, which was at Kiva. So Kiva is this micro-lending distribution platform, and they allow people to make peer-to-peer loans. And so how that works in practice is they have distribution partners, because someone like you or me or someone in America might want to make a loan to Matilda in Zambia, but it's actually very expensive to do the loan operations on the ground, because the loan in Zambia is not going to be by a bank transfer. That loan is going to be in cash to a village, delivered by someone on a motorbike. So how they do that is they actually partner with a bunch of microfinance institutions, and the microfinance institutions will post pictures of the borrowers who take out their loans to get a 0% credit line for those borrowers. And what then they asked me to do was to support those partners in operations, but as well as monitoring the validity of those loans. So I actually got to go out to Zambia, Mozambique and Malawi and meet a lot of those people. And so what was really interesting was that it was actually, microfinance gets a really bad rap in the UK because people say, oh, it's like loan sharks. But actually when you go, you realise the banks don't lend to micro entrepreneurs. So for many people, it's their only form of access to debt. And then in other cases, it was actually like very focused around women. So most of the borrowers that I was meeting were women, and they were running their donut store, or they were running a little kiosk selling phone cards. And so it was actually really nice in terms of women's economic empowerment as well. So that really shaped my thinking around finance as a tool for inclusion, as a tool for agency. And so, I really enjoyed the experience. I enjoyed being able to see the world. And so at McKinsey as well, I started in the Dubai office. I ended up in the Berlin office, but my main clients were in Egypt, Lagos, Nigeria, and Copenhagen. So again, got to see a really wide range of financial institutions. When I left to set up my investment company, Octa Investment, a lot of people actually just started asking me for financial advice. And what I found interesting was that a lot of these people were very highly educated, either in finance or otherwise, but they might be lawyers or doctors, but they just didn't have the first clue about their finances, or they felt stressed about their finances. So, we write a blog at Mula, and one of the blog articles we wrote was about this phenomenon that the Financial Times called money dysmorphia, where people felt poorer than they actually were. And a lot of that is down to the comparison culture, which I can see a lot of seeing London and seeing the social structures in London. So we basically, so I started doing this financial modeling using a spreadsheet. And then last summer I hired an intern to stress test that spreadsheet. And we were basically just going around and offering everyone a financial model. And after a while, the financial model starts to look quite similar, but we just wanted to make sure that we got the logic straight before we started putting it into code. And so we ended up doing about 10 models, and then we started building that out. But then again, there's like a lot of things that we learned along the way about the customer journey, customer experience, things like how people like to receive information. We try to make things as clear as possible with the dashboarding. And so, at the end of that, we ended up with a platform, Mula Money, which we've just launched today in public beta. But even then, you have to go through a lot of testing on the way. So we were in private beta for a couple of months. As well, where myself and Phil, our head of product, would just sit down in 45-minute sessions and just watch people go through the platform and guide them. And that again was really helpful because we could set up the AI agents to focus on certain things, like what are things that people get wrong all the time or feel confused about all the time, like where do we need to add extra definitions. So we've really been building in public directly with the customer, and so far it's been a great journey.
Amazing. And if I can take you back to that younger self, it feels like maybe there's always been something quite entrepreneurial in you. As your younger self, would you have called yourself entrepreneurial, or is it something you learned kind of during that experience of seeing those women and working with microfinance, and what's that journey felt like?
Yeah, I think I've always been entrepreneurial, but I didn't realize that's what it was. And actually the manufacturing engineering course at Cambridge is pretty good for teaching that. So they started teaching things like innovation. And then when I went to Yale as well, I was doing all of the startup club programming. And I actually in my second year of the MBA, when I was choosing careers, I was most drawn to management consulting and product management. And it just so happened that management consulting had an earlier recruitment timeline. So I got an offer and I went for it. But I have always loved product and thinking about product. And I think it's just that really nice interface between human needs and technical development. And so, I'm definitely entrepreneurial in the sense of I really like working collaboratively with people. I really like iterating. I do think I actually forced myself in a corporate career for longer than I had to, but at the end of the day, it was only half a decade and I'm still young. So, it definitely feels very natural to be building, to be talking to people. Happy about the path that I'm on.
And so tell me a little bit about taking that leap, because I think it's something that our listeners will be really interested in terms of, I'm sure there are people who are listening who are like, oh, I'd love to be an entrepreneur, but the idea terrifies them. So what was it that made you make that leap from kind of being an employee to your setting up your first business, and how did that feel? Like, how did that come about?
Yeah, there was definitely culture shock because when I was in McKinsey Dubai, I really actually enjoyed the culture there. I found it quite entrepreneurial. It's, the Middle East, there's a lot of business. People are hustling. And then I wanted to move to Berlin. So I pushed for the German office at McKinsey to accept me to Berlin. And I thought that, okay, Berlin's where I want to be. I wasn't ready to go back to London. But then when I got there, the office culture was very, very stiff, very formal. And I was like, I don't want to be doing this. I actually set up my first company out of necessity because of Brexit, I needed to support my own visa. And so I was like, okay, well, I have to set up a company. I have to be doing something productive. What's something that I know how to do quite well? And it's investing, because I had been retail investing for about a decade by then. So I did that, started structuring it properly, started deploying capital, but like I didn't find it that interesting because it was, I was investing in private equity funds as well as like late stage private companies. But once the deal's done, and then you're just accounting. So I just naturally got quite bored of that. And then I think it's when, people were asking me for advice, and I was just doing these models and taking it really seriously and applying these business tools that I'd learned at McKinsey, but to personal and household finances. I actually got a lot of joy out of that. And I got a lot of joy talking to people about what shaped their attitudes behind money. And so, on the Mula platform, if you do want to test it out, the first module that you do is like this psychographic assessment. And that basically is a questionnaire to help you assess your own ideas about money. But I realized that when you talk about money with people, it's never just about like a number on a screen. It brings up a lot of traumas in people. It's very triggering. People don't like talking about it, but everyone has anxieties over it. And especially in the UK, it's almost a taboo subject, but it's also like underlining everything important in life. And I think it can be a bit, another thing that we try and focus on is everyone has this obsession with budgeting, and I just don't think budgeting is where it's at. So I'm part of the generation that got told we couldn't afford houses because we're eating too much avocado toast. But then I saw through investing that you can just make very simple decisions, small and simple decisions. And the effect of compounding makes it such that all the avocado toasts don't make a dent. So we really try and focus on that positive reinforcement of you go out and enjoy your Starbucks lattes, go out and have your avocado toast. But then if you want to figure out how to make your pensions work and, cover for that, like that's where we come in. We help more with the medium and long-term planning.
I think that's really interesting, because I think that attitude to money thing is something, as you say, I think it's different for different generations, but also for different genders, I think, as well. And also, I think different if you're an employee versus a founder. So what's been your learn of going from being an employee with a salary, accepting you're already doing a bit of investing, to kind of managing, conscious your business is all about money, but a lot of founders probably shy away from that money conversation as well. Kind of, what's your view on how founders look at money within a business in terms of how they fund it, how they manage their money in a business? How have you found that versus being an employee?
So I think it depends on how people choose to fund their company, right? Because if someone's bootstrapping, like we were bootstrapping at the start, and actually even with our own company, it's like I actually preserve the cash inside it. So even travel costs, like I'll pay from my own pocket rather than using the company account. So I think when you're in the bootstrap stage, you have to just like make every dime count. But then it's like, things can change with VC funding. And I think it's more so in America than in the UK. But you hear these stories about like private jets and champagne bottles and all that stuff as soon as the VC money comes in. I don't think we're like quite prudent. And so actually one really smart thing that we did was because we got a check last year in dollars, and the geopolitical situation being what it was, I basically said, look, like I don't think the dollar's going to do that well this year, so let's just put that check into gold, because and then anything that we don't touch for another 6 to 9 months, let's just put it in gold, and then gold goes up 60%. So we basically just by diligently managing our money, we created more money, and I think that's quite important for us to do, especially because we're supporting people to make decisions on money. So I think that's it's important that we lead by example. Another thing is that my co-founder and I, we don't take a salary from the company because we are just trying to preserve. So we have started doing a lot of things with AI tools. So it used to be that if you want to do this, you have to have a full team of devs. We started out with Replit. And so we still needed a couple of devs to support us with cleaning our code. And then a couple of weeks ago, we learned how to use Claude Code, which was completely revolutionary for us. And so that actually enabled us to ship. We were only going to ship our public beta at the end of next month. And because of that massive leap ahead we got in the development process, we're able to ship a couple of weeks earlier.
Wow. So there's a real, obviously, kind of leaning into that new technology and the benefits it can bring. And you mentioned a co-founder. What have been your learns of having a co-founder versus being a solo founder? Kind of how have you learned to navigate having a co-founder? Because sometimes that can be great. Sometimes my guess is it probably isn't.
Yeah, so it's been great in this case because we know each other really well. So our dads were business partners. We grew up together. So we're basically related. I actually remember because they come from China as well. So we had that Chinese immigrant experience. But once when we were in China together, we went to visit her relatives. And I was saying to her, it's really weird because I always forget that your relatives aren't my relatives. So we are really close, and as it's more of a sister relationship than a classic co-founder experience. It was really hard for us to figure out the right configuration to build with because that landscape's changed so much, right? So again, a couple of years ago, you would have said, okay, we need a CTO to build this product because it's a software product. We actually tried to interview some CTOs. We tried and did some workshops with some CTOs, and we just couldn't find the right fit. And then we actually realized what we need is a CPO. So what we have now is we managed to poach Phil, who was building fintech products at McKinsey as Leap. So that's the digital practice at McKinsey. And he was literally building digital products for banks. So we managed to get him in, and that's actually been a really good cultural fit because between the three of us, we all have corporate backgrounds and then went into the startup route. We all, between us, we cover operations, fintech, wealth, digital. So it's a really nice founding team, but it took us a really long time to get Phil. So Susan and I started this like last year, and then Phil joined us in October. And until that time, we tried definitely double digits of ways to try and build this. Yeah.
And in terms of that journey as well, what's been your biggest learn from building this business, from bootstrapping upwards and getting some investment? Like, if you could reflect back maybe over the last kind of 18 months, what's the thing you've learned that kind of you weren't expecting?
Yeah, the landscape is changing so quickly. So I think the most important thing is to be adaptable. I think I was always a bit like that in general, but a lot of people who come from the corporate world, they've trained a long time in one thing, consider themselves an expert in one thing, and they don't actually realize that the entire landscape has changed. And that can be a really hard thing for people to stomach. Yeah. So we were talking about this. I was talking about this with one of my best friends who's a senior software dev at Spotify. And he was telling me that at Spotify, they don't let you hand code things anymore. Like, you can't just type out code. Everything you do has to go through AI. So they use Claude Code there as well. And so I was asking him for tips and tricks on how to use it. And so it was like, they've just gone down the route of saying like, there's no way that we as humans can compete with this machine generated code, which is really interesting and radical. And I think we just have to realize now that we're going to have to let go of a lot of these things that we spent a lot of time building up. So another thing that I find really interesting is the abundance of intelligence. And, I went to university and I did a master's degree. And so I spent 6 years of my life in post high school education. But even then, it's just like, okay. And I spent all that time at McKinsey. And the first time I actually used Perplexity for market research, I was really astounded because I was like, wow, this is like the output of of a really good analyst, but instead of it taking them 1 or 2 weeks, it's instant. And then I can basically go through a whole 2-week analysis in about a 20-minute round of back and forth with this machine. And so I really actually saw the impact of it then. And it's like a lot of people I still see are trying to hold on to something and trying to say like, oh, humans are still better than AI at something because XXY. And so I'm going to keep doing it the old fashioned way. And you just really can't hold on to that anymore. It's just like, you have to just adapt, figure out what's helpful to the current situation, because no one knows what tomorrow is going to look like. I could not have imagined myself, like even 2 years ago, because I have a decent understanding of technology, what a stack looks like, what different things do, but I never learned to code. And that was always like, okay, so I need to just like figure out how to turn things into technical requirements. And I would never have imagined myself in a couple of years' time building and rebuilding a fintech product.
So I think that's really interesting, isn't it? Is that so? One of the big learns I think you're saying is learning to embrace the new without the ego of, well, I know how to do this. I've always done it like that. So embracing that new world and learning as you go, that kind of iteration. What's the biggest milestone? I'm conscious that on the day that we're recording, you've actually just launched your public beta project. So the answer might be that. But what's been the biggest milestone in Mula Money so far in your kind of founder journey that's made you kind of sit and go, wow, we've got here?
Yeah, I think that actually. There's been a lot of other things that I've done that are just like faster and because I'm just one of these people that has a million ideas, but I can only just pick a few to execute on. And now it's like, actually, because of these technological changes, if you're able to learn how to use new tools quickly, you can build things so much faster. And so, for example, I had a podcast that I recorded last year and I'm still releasing it now. But then it used to take me ages to do the editing. And it can be really tedious as well. But I found this tool called Descript that it does transcript based editing. So it just removes all the filler words for you. Yeah, perfect. And then it takes the clips for you. And so it's like, okay, well, that's just saved me hours and hours of time. And I probably would have gotten so sick of it that I would have outsourced it. So something like that has made it possible for me to like produce with only 2 collaborators. So I have someone helping me with pre-production because it does take a lot of time to schedule guests, interviews, book studios, all that stuff. And also the editing. So there's still someone who does a line edit to bring in all these different cameras and microphones together. But it's still like a very, very light team. And then last month, we're still in February. So this month, I got a notification from GoodPod saying that was in the top 50 category for both technology and the economics categories. So that was quite nice. It's quite nice to see that you can like build high quality things quickly still. Also able to write much more quickly. So I've always enjoyed writing and publishing. But then once you kind of get the hang of writing with an AI assistant as your co-author, I'm just able to kind of churn out my ideas much more quickly and doing the research much more quickly. So yeah, I think there's a lot of products that I'm quite proud of, but I'm also just happy and grateful for the technology that enables them to be completed products rather than just ideas in my head.
And so I think that's a really interesting, because I think that's a very common thing for entrepreneurs, where you don't just have one idea and do it. You always have lots of different ideas going. How do you focus on the big ideas and really driving those through and not let all of the ideas you've got in your head kind of take over?
Yeah, I think, to be honest, I think it is hard for me to focus. So I said last year that I was closing off my projects, but a lot of these projects you forget that they take a longer time than you expect them to, because I've recorded all the podcast episodes, but then you don't realize that like the distribution also takes time. And so it's like I've been super strict with myself in 2026, which is that like I'm not going to start any new projects this year because they feel light, but then they just last a really long time. And then that's still like a couple of hours out of your week every week. I genuinely like really enjoy Mula Money. I think also because of the team dynamics, we're in a really good and interesting place now. It's been so satisfying because the product is janky for so long before it becomes usable. And so now, today I shared the link with a couple of people and they were like, wow, this is great. And I was like, wow, considering that I got so used to thinking about it as a janky product, but have been putting the work in with all the in-person customer interviews and going through customer walkthroughs, etc. It's like, oh, actually, that's now just taking a step change because the outcome is what I wanted it to be, which, yeah. And so I think other things that I find really meaningful as well is when we see the impact of our work. So between the G Sheet modeling alpha program of last year and then being where we are today, we went back to a lot of our customers during the private beta and just asked them to do the testing again. And it was amazing just to see how much their behavior had changed through the act of thinking of financial modeling. So in one case, someone was investing 8 times as much. In another case, someone actually decided to leave their job because they were more financially secure than they thought they were. They were like, I want to
Wow.
do this. Yeah. So it's like actually having that real world impact. And especially because our early test users are our friends. So just being able to support people with decisions like that is super meaningful.
And what's kind of what's next for you and Mula Money? Because I suppose, not to tie you to it, but if you've got all these big ideas, like what's your mission? You're going to take it to a certain place? Is your aim to kind of sail and exit? What's your view of kind of your entrepreneurial journey in the future? Do you see yourself doing this and then finding a new challenge?
Yeah. I think the really nice thing about doing this specifically is that it's very top of funnel because we're looking at the guidance layer and the product could go anywhere after that. So you have, because anything could make natural sense, right? So some of the ideas we floated are doing what's called arranging financial products. So having basically a very guided compare the market view of someone's done their financial planning exercise with us. At the end, they've realized that because of their low risk tolerance and need for liquidity immediately, they might not want a brokerage platform, but they might want a high yield savings account. And then we have two ways of offering them that. So one is that we offer the product ourselves, but another one is actually saying, okay, here's 5 from Lloyds, NatWest, Santander. Here are their interest rates. Now let's see what that looks like if you throw all your money that's currently sitting in your 0% account into one of those accounts. And then in that affiliate marketing model, we would basically charge partners for any completed action. So I've already mentioned too there's becoming a bank, basically offering our own solutions as well as affiliate marketing. And then there's other things where we could focus on specific parts of the journey, which is what a lot of our, I wouldn't even say competitors because they're not in the direct competitive space, but a lot of people that compare us to Mint, for example, which is budgeting, or I'm struggling because in Germany it's called Trade Republic, but Robinhood, say. So like an investment brokerage platform where we do the support people to directly invest. So I think that is another area where it's like, okay, so maybe it's not just vanilla banking products, but maybe it's like something a bit more special, or maybe pensions and insurances. So I think what we're actually trying to do now, which does sound vague, is figure out what is the next step for us, because actually just by testing this in the market and asking people, like, what do you want next? I think letting the market guide us a bit as well. I think there's massive value from the piece at the moment, especially because it is so AI assisted, and a lot of people are just like asking the AI agent, like, what else can I do? What's this? What does that mean? And someone said to me the other day, they said, oh, I've learned so much just from filling out these forms. So I think there is value in that, but then there's also just so many opportunities for downstream integration.
And I think, obviously the mission of it is that kind of giving people financial confidence and a bit of financial literacy, and it's filling a gap, clearly filling a gap if the people that your customers are saying it's useful and it's helping them make decisions. Kind of, why do you, and it's UK based at the moment, isn't it? It's UK focused at the moment.
So the product's actually international, but we'll focus the marketing spend on the UK.
Yeah. So what do you think has created that lack of knowledge in finances? So you've obviously got customers who are benefiting from it because they haven't learned it before. So how did you identify that gap, and where do you think that gap stems from? Because I think that financial literacy and taking ownership of your finances is something I think we see a lot. There's big gaps, especially in the UK.
Yeah, I think the first thing is that it's just not taught in schools. So it's not part of the national curriculum, or it wasn't until November. So there was a group of campaigners that included Louise Hill from Go Henry, who were campaigning for it to be added. And it was, which is great because it's just such fundamental information. And I think there's a lot of bad information out there as well. So it's actually good to have none of the pressure of national curriculum and high quality education about finance. So that's a critical one, but I don't think it's taught in many places at all. So that's not a shortcoming specifically of the UK. I think the second thing is that the economy of our parents' generation is not the same as the economy today. And so we took a look into, because one thing that came out as really interesting in our modeling is that often people lose money by buying a house. So especially in today's environment in the UK, a mortgage will cost you upwards of 4.5% APR, and then house prices are only increasing by about 3%. So that means you're actually losing about 1.5% of your principal every single year, which is really counterintuitive for our parents' generation, because they're like, oh, but like I buy, and then when I had enough in savings, I did a buy to let, and then it was just free money. But it's like, you know, and then they see their house price increase by like 5x or something over a couple of decades, but you just don't see that kind of growth anymore. Because there have been a lot of controls like stamp duty to prevent the rise of house prices. But then we're also in a very inflationary environment. And so interest rates have been super high, especially since COVID. But people still don't really get that. It's just an interest rate game. And I don't get me wrong, I think there's a lot of other non-monetary reasons to buy a house, which is...
There's a real psychology, isn't there?
Yeah,
owning a house, I think.
Yeah, but it's just like, oh, I need to buy a house. And it's like, well, actually you don't. And so you're seeing now a lot of younger people, at least in America. I was listening to a Vox podcast episode about this, of people who have just decided, I'm going to rent forever, but I'm going to have a really good life. And so that's actually more economically sensible, but people still don't feel secure in that. And so, yeah, there's a lot of really paradoxical thinking. And sometimes it does make sense. Like if you have young kids and just want the feeling of like having your own home that you want to raise your kids in, I think like that makes perfect sense to buy a house. But it's just this decoupling of the old equation. Another example of the decoupling of the old equation is that our parents were telling us work hard and you'll get a good job, and then you can work in that job for the rest of your life and have a nice retirement. But then, you know, they were working in their jobs for 10, 20 years, which is quite normal. But actually, I think millennials are staying in jobs for 1 to 5 years. So the entire economy has become fragmented. And that's especially true now because it's like, okay, all these skills are changing completely. And someone gave an example of, well, actually a lot of the skills, a lot of the jobs that you have now, like content marketers or influencers, like most of them didn't exist 10 years ago. So it's just, we're going through one of these really disruptive phases. Crypto is a really interesting one. So I was skeptical of crypto, and then I was like, well, I kind of need to get involved because it's just like you can't not get involved if you're in finance. And so I started following it quite closely. But the sociological impact of the storytelling there is also fascinating because, you know, you have people in their 20s who are sitting around, you know, they've worked really hard to find some job, and then they get laid off in the tech layoffs or something. But then they're watching their peers who just spent a bunch of money on Dogecoin and watched that 20x. And so I'm not saying that that's the right thing to do. But again, it's just like decoupling this equation of hard work equals success, where actually the new equation is risk equals reward. And that has always been the case economically, but people are actually really starting to fundamentally understand that now.
Yeah, and I think that generational change is huge. I think it's probably one of the biggest changes we've seen in terms of what our parents' generation would have expected. You know, get a job, stay in a job for 20 odd years, get a pension, buy a house you can afford that makes money, versus the reality of both the Gen Z and the millennials now is a very different reality. The world operates really differently. And understanding your money and your finances is so key to that, because that gives you getting that right gives you the freedom, as you say, to go off and make the decisions that you want to do that you wouldn't have if you hadn't kind of got to grips with it. So it's been so interesting learning a little bit more about your journey and Mula Money. In terms of your learns as a founder, and kind of what are the biggest things that you've learned on your founder journey?
So I think one is we could have failed faster, in the sense of I'm generally pretty fine with failure, and I think you have to be if you're trying to create something new. But sometimes we got too attached to something when we should have just let it go a bit earlier.
Mm.
And yeah, I think a second thing as well is I was actually putting off learning Claude Code because I thought it was going to be more something similar to Windsurf or Cursor, where you do actually need to know how to code, and then the AI assistant acts like an assistant to you compared to compared to Claude Code, where it's actually in the driving seat. So I was honestly putting off learning for a really long time. Because I'd like just learned to use all these other tools. And then I was like, as soon as I did, it was like, okay, this is actually revolutionary. I see what people have been talking about now. So I definitely could have just been faster in those cycles of picking up, dropping, which is why I think I alluded to it earlier in this conversation as well. Like, I think just speed matters and just like pivoting really quickly and everything matters. Yeah.
So how you said you're quite good at kind of failing quickly, and you're on a learning journey. I think that's really fundamental, irrelevant if you're a founder or not. How do you flex that muscle of failing fast? Because I think it's something that a lot of us are terrified to do. And it, as you say, even someone who self-confessed would say you're pretty good at failing fast. You put off doing something, and actually you're now like, oh, actually, if I'd done this before, stuff would have moved even quicker. So when you think about like, how did you gain that muscle of failing, being okay with failing?
I think realizing that no one cares. I think like everyone like thinks about their reputation, like, oh, what will people think of me? And actually everyone's just so self-centered because they're all thinking the same thing. They're all thinking like, what will other people think about me? That they're not actually just thinking about other people. So it's like actually just realizing how self-centered most people are, and that like no one actually really cares. So so I think just like coming around to that, and like there's so many cringe things that you have to do as a founder, right? Especially building in consumer. I've just been going around begging everyone to try my product, even though it's like janky, it doesn't work properly. I know that it doesn't work properly, and like just trying to just get the most of it I can on other levels, just figure out what is the most helpful feedback that I can get on this product right now. So yeah, just not being scared to be cringe and just going for it and getting as much of that as possible. And then, because you have to do so much PR as well, especially in consumer facing, like your own brand has to align with your company's brand. And I actually hate it. I do so much of it. So people are always surprised when I say like, I really don't like doing the LinkedIn posting because I have scheduled posts going on my LinkedIn, but yeah, I just get robots to automate it, so it's less cringe. So I'm like, okay, ChatGPT, just write this LinkedIn post in this style, and then I can just like take a look at it and edit it. But it's actually quite nice because it's like, oh, I don't have to come up with this thing anymore, which is like, which is kind of, just cringe. It's like your cringe levels just get so high that like you just ignore them. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting is that it's that learn, which is there might be bits of it that you don't really want to do. But I love what you're saying is this no one's paying that much attention. That actually, don't procrastinate on it because to your point, people aren't paying that much attention. They're too busy worrying about themselves and what's the worst that can happen. And just, it's better to be out there than it is to overthink it maybe.
Yeah, for sure. And so it's like a massive pivot going from the planning mindset to just doing. And you have to do it with a bit of foresight, but then, it's shifting from there.
Yeah. Interesting. Excellent. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story with us today. I've just got one final question I want to ask you to share with our listeners around kind of just any final thoughts you've got about being a founder, whether it's a challenge, an opportunity, a learn. Like, if you could just share one final thought with the listeners about being a founder, what would that final thought be?
I think there's no better time to do it than now, because the same things that you need to survive as a founder are things like, thriving in volatility, acting fast, being decisive. I think they're so important now because they're the types of things that AIs actually can't do that much. And so just training yourself to do it is great. It's very transferable to anything else you want to do. And you might as well do it now while the entire labor structure and work structure is reconfiguring itself, so that you can see what is the next paradigm and what are the next skills that are useful. Because I actually found it more natural and easier than I felt than sticking to this very deterministic work that I was doing, because the pace of change in the world has increased so rapidly.
Brilliant. Great insight. Linda, thank you so much for sharing your story with us today. We will, when the pod goes out, we will obviously put a link in for Mula Money so everyone can go and give it a go and let us know how they found it. So thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thanks to you too, Sam. Thanks for having me.
That's a wrap for this week's episode of Women Are Good Business podcast, and thank you for listening. Now I need your help. We want to make the podcast huge. We want more people to hear about the stories of female founders. We want to get the best experts in the world so we can grill them with your questions, and we can only do that if people know where to find us. So please help us make the podcast go viral. Like, follow, subscribe, leave us a review, drop us into a WhatsApp group. Whatever is the best way to share, please do share and come with us on the journey as we talk to lots of female founders and we show the world that women really are good business.